It has been over 1,000 days since Lonzo Ball last stepped on an NBA court. 2.5 seasons, one meniscus transplant, and a complete roster overhaul later, the stage is set for him to make his return to basketball. With that, there are a seemingly endless amount of question marks. Will he be the same player, or will we see some serious athletic regression? Will he still be injury prone, or will he be able to stay healthy for the entire season? Are the Bulls planning to keep him around, or could his unique skill set help a more competitive team? And to begin tackling some of these questions, we first have to look at the type of player he was before the injury. The Bulls entered the 2022 season firing on all cylinders. It's easy to forget because of how things turned out, but through their first 40 games, they actually had the number 1 seed in the East with a record of 27-13. Game number 40 was the last game Lonzo played in, and in the following 42 games, they went just 19-23, falling all the way from number 1 to number 6. Over the next 2 years, they never got anywhere close to the level they played at to start that season, and a big reason for that was a huge gap in the roster that Lonzo Ball would otherwise be filling. Most of that value came on the defensive end, with him and Caruso rewriting the narrative on what it means to anchor a defense. At 6'6" with a 6'9" wingspan, Lonzo's a giant guard, and that allowed him to just completely swarm smaller ball handlers. Offensive players always had to be secure with the ball, because if he saw an opportunity to poke at it with his lightning quick hands, chances are he was forcing a turnover. Despite all that size and length though, he remained incredibly agile, so when he was picking up guards in space, not only was it tough to get around him, he could smother any attempt to go over the top. Even on a play like this, where the offensive player appears to get a step by his hip, he uses his length to stay attached and makes it an impossible finish. With that said, he wasn't very effective in an all-out chase, meaning that when he did get completely beat off the dribble, there wasn't much chance of a recovery. As a result, he could struggle with the league's shiftiest attackers. Notice how Maxey has no trouble getting around him, and by the time he touches the paint, Lonzo's essentially a non-factor. But against guards who didn't have that outlier burst or a ton of downhill momentum, that size helped him completely shut off the paint. In addition to sometimes struggling to keep explosive attackers in front of him, I also don't think he was the greatest at getting around screens. When paired with his lack of presence in rear pursuit, that hurt his ability to defend at the point of attack. It also hurt when he had to chase shooters around away from the ball. On this one, he's trying to stick with Lowry, but gets clipped hard by a screen, and after that, he might as well be out of the play entirely. Whenever he was going up against a weaker screener though, that's when his rare combination of size and agility popped, hawking the ball like a world-class defender. That unique physical profile wasn't only effective against guards though. Versatility was the true key in making him such an impactful defender. Typically, lengthier wings have to sacrifice strength to remain fluid, but Lonzo was really strong, which allowed him to consistently switch onto bigger players. He could guard bigger wings who like to play out of the mid-post, sitting down and using his core to absorb contact with the length to contest a turnaround jumper. Maybe his best defensive performance came against the Knicks, when he was matched up with Julius Randle. Same thing, absorbing contact, getting a hand up, and I haven't even gotten into how his hands can dictate things on the floor, looking for every opportunity to poke or swipe down at the ball. Sharp hands like that to go along with his strength even made the Bulls comfortable occasionally throwing him on opposing fives. And sometimes those fives couldn't even get the touches they wanted, as he could also blow up the entry pass. He was truly a defensive Swiss Army knife, whether he was stonewalling a drive from a 7-footer, stepping in front of a wing and going vertical, or poking the ball out from a big. He could do just about everything as a man defender, and that meant he could play multiple different roles in the same possession. This play starts with him chasing James Harden around a couple of screens and staying glued to the ball. The Nets grab a second chance, only for Lonzo to immediately pick up Bembry down low and shut off the rim. Speaking of which, he was a very good rim protector. Of course, by virtue of being 6'6", he couldn't quite stand tall and deter shots at the level of most bigs, but when you compare him to other guards, the length, verticality, and timing were just off the charts. And he was almost always in position to make those types of plays thanks to his activity and awareness as a help defender. You'd rarely ever see him miss a rotation. He knew exactly when and where to be at all times with the range to get there. Take this play for example. He starts in the weak side corner, and as soon as Hayes starts to drive, he puts himself in perfect position to turn it away. That creates a 2-on-1 advantage on the perimeter, only for Zoe to get back to his man on a closeout and block the three. His court coverage was nothing short of incredible. Regardless of where he was on the floor, he was a threat to make a play. Even on a possession like this where he starts at the point of attack. When his man gets rid of the ball, instead of giving up on the play, he continues to follow that pass into a double team and forces a turnover. Here's another example. Luka's going to work in isolation while Lonzo attentively defends the nail. Luka puts pressure on the middle before spinning back to his left, and typically that's when the nail defender would recover to his man. Only Lonzo decides to commit to the ball, blindsiding Luka. This next play right here is basically a culmination of what made the Bulls so good defensively. Him and Caruso can seamlessly switch any action, and when PG starts to isolate, Lonzo helps very aggressively. It looks like man is wide open on the perimeter, only for those lightning quick hands to shut off the lane. Like I said, Lonzo could essentially play any role defensively. At the point of attack, he could sometimes struggle with shifty creators or big screeners, but his size and agility still made him very effective. He was strong enough to switch onto powerful 3s or 4s, occasionally even picking up 5s when needed. Then away from the ball, he was active and engaged, had incredible instincts as a helper, and could either blow up passing lanes or go vertical at the rim. That's an extremely high-level defensive chess piece, and the Bulls certainly reaped the benefits. Chicago's roster wasn't very good defensively. LaVine and DeRozan both played heavy minutes while Vooch was holding down the middle, and in virtually any other situation, that front court would not be able to produce even an average defense. But with Lonzo and Caruso holding down those two backcourt spots, they weren't just average, they were elite. Just to add some perspective, the league's average defensive rating in 2022 was 112.6. In less than 500 minutes of those two guards playing together, the team had a defensive rating of 104.6. With just Caruso on the floor, that number was 110.5. With just Lonzo, it was 112.1. And with neither on the floor, they completely collapsed, just a measly 118.5. There are so many teams out there that would salivate at the idea of employing this valuable of a defender, and we haven't even gotten into the offense. Lonzo's most valuable trait as an offensive player was his ability to push pace. Every single time he touched the ball in the backcourt, he was looking for immediate outlets, often grabbing rebounds and kicking it ahead without even taking a dribble. What stood out most to me about these passes was his absurd processing speed. Just watch him on this play. He's looking at the ball, never once taking his eyes away from it, and it's only when he touches the ball that he looks ahead. Not even a second later, it's in Zach LaVine's hands for a dunk. In addition to the speed of these passes, they were always thrown with pinpoint precision. This is a near 70-foot pass that has to sneak through a tight window, and it lands exactly where LaVine wants it. Even after made baskets, he was always looking for opportunities to get the team playing in transition, so his teammates were always running. As a result, they were must-watch TV. The Showtime Bulls, as some might say. You've got Lonzo doing his best impression of Tom Brady, while LaVine gets the crowd going with a 360 dunk. In the event that there wasn't an immediate outlet or kick-ahead pass, that's when Zoe would push the ball down the middle as a ball handler, drawing help and finding the open man. Rarely ever was he actually looking to score on these plays. He just knew how to pressure the defense in the right spots to create those passing windows. And if the defense decided that they weren't going to step in front of his drive, well, he didn't have a problem taking it to the rack himself. Although he wasn't a huge open floor scorer like Giannis or LeBron, I'm not sure there was a better transition passer in the entire league during this time. When paired with his size and speed, that made him an elite offensive engine when playing with pace. As a result, he could still initiate some half-court possessions. Often that meant a quick ball screen in early offense where he was able to apply pressure and make the right reads. Like I said, he wasn't much of a scoring threat, especially when the game slowed down. However, his passing was so good that he'd exploit any slight openings in the defense. I don't have a concrete ranking in front of me, but I feel pretty confident saying that he was one of the 10 or so best passers in the NBA, maybe even higher than that. And that really stood out whenever the Bulls got into set action. On this one, you're going to see LaVine reject a cross screen in the middle, and at this exact frame right here is when Lonzo decides he's going to make that pass. The anticipation and accuracy required to pull that off can't be overstated. Every now and then though, you'd see some ball screens set for Zoe, and that's where he'd utilize his best trait as a scorer. If you remember, coming into the league, shooting was probably the biggest question mark for him. His form was questionable at best, he couldn't make even 50% of his free throws, and was barely a 30% three-point shooter. Then those New Orleans shooting coaches completely transformed his shot to the point where he not only became a serviceable shooter, but a great one. He's at his best off the catch, which I'll get into in a second, but from 2020 to 2022, he still attempted over 300 off the dribble threes, and he made a healthy 33.5% of them. It's not great, but it's enough to punish certain coverages like a deep drop or a soft switch, and it's enough to get the defense to react on a play like this where he fakes the jumper before hitting a wide open roller. With all of that said though, a 33.5% pull-up three was by far his best trait as an on-ball scorer, and as a result, his overall pick and roll numbers weren't very good. In 2020, he ran over 240 pick and rolls that featured a scoring attempt, and he produced a putrid 0.58 points per possession, good for the 11th percentile. In 2021, he seemed to take a bit of a leap, actually producing above average efficiency at 0.94 points per possession, and then in 2022, it was right back to 0.73, 27th percentile, making it very clear that this just wasn't his bread and butter. Not only was the efficiency very low, but he only ran these plays 2, maybe 3 times a game, and that's because of how flawed his scoring was inside the arc. It felt like he only had one speed as a driver, which helped in transition, but limited his ability to create finishing angles in the half court. He also didn't have the best touch around the rim, which when paired with his one speed, meant that he left a lot of easy layups strong. To make matters even worse, he paired that lackluster interior scoring with a virtually non-existent mid-range game. Whether it was a floater or a pull-up jumper, he could not take advantage of that in-between space at all. Again, using those 3 years before the injury, he made just 30% of his mid-range shots. So while the idea of Lonzo as a creator sounds good, considering he's a plus athlete and an elite passer, the actual results weren't great, almost solely relying on pull-up threes to carry all of his scoring. For that reason, he spent most of his time in the half court playing away from the ball. And I'd say this part of his game is incredibly underrated. Remember, I said he was at his best as a shooter off the catch. In 2022, he was 8th in the NBA at 5.5 catch and shoot 3-point attempts a game, while making a very impressive 42.5% of them. And it's not like this was some outlier year. In 2021, he was 6th in volume at 5.9 attempts while still over 40% shooting. He was a guy who not only demanded attention, he demanded hard closeouts. And when paired with his athleticism, that made him pretty effective as a slasher off the catch. However, I'd actually say his most valuable off-ball skill was his passing and how that allowed him to connect the offense when spotting up. Zach LaVine's an elite scorer who's gonna draw aggressive coverages, but he's a limited passer. So having a guy like Lonzo one pass away who can take that decision-making load away from LaVine and find the open man can really bring the offense to another level. And all that's to say, on both ends of the floor, Lonzo was pretty much the ideal complementary piece. His lack of on-ball scoring prevented him from being a lead creator or big-time offensive option in the half court, but if you're a team that already has that covered, he can plug in as a connective piece, pushing pace, knocking down spot-up threes, moving the ball, everything you want in a 4th or 5th option. With that, he brought elite, versatile defense at the guard position. There are so many teams in the league right now that this 2022 version of Lonzo Ball could move the needle for. My mind immediately goes to the Sixers. They've got 3 big-time scorers who all have passing limitations, and their best connector is a 38-year-old Kyle Lowry. They also don't have the greatest perimeter defense, so Lonzo's skill set would offer a huge boost for them on both ends. In the same line of thinking, Milwaukee's another team that seems to have everything figured out except perimeter defense. Adding an elite defensive guard without sacrificing the spacing around Giannis could just be enough to get them into that first tier of contenders. I could keep going. The Cavs, the Pacers, out west, the Nuggets or the Mavericks. I mean, it'd be easier to put together a list of teams that wouldn't benefit from his skill set because of how unique it is. With all of that said though, it's important to keep in mind that this all happened more than 1,000 days ago, and we still have no idea what to expect. Maybe the Bulls want to keep him around to help out with some of their young guys. Maybe he's nowhere near the same athlete he once was, which takes away from his defense and transition game. Or maybe, just maybe, he gets back to peak form this season, becomes the most sought after asset at the trade deadline, and becomes a high impact player for a team that's looking to win a championship. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Lonzo. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.